in the seventh narrative, and now the left has just sort of admitted that it wasn't the gun, or it wasn't Trump, or it wasn't a love story, etc. And they were kind of open about it. They're saying, well, we don't really glorify anybody dying, however, but of course, maybe, sort of, kind of, he's dead. And we didn't agree with him, and he was a bad guy. And what are you going to do about it? That's their narrative today. A couple of just random thoughts we mentioned the other day, but they've been more clarified. The trans boyfriend, girlfriend, the timeline doesn't quite make sense as the overly cooperative witness, because there's a gap between the shooting, his knowledge of the shooting, and his volunteering to cooperate with the police. And that's post facto. And you could say pre facto. You might argue that when they mentioned the engraving of the bullets, the two of them, then he had knowledge of what he was going to do. And he could have saved Charlie Kirk's life.
The disturbing part is this wasn't just one man's decision. It's tied to something bigger. An entire generation grew up cut off from real life, shut in during lockdowns, glued to devices, and escaping into fantasy. That isolation left deep scars, and now we're seeing the consequences in anger, instability, and violence.
We're not supposed to talk about this, but it was like a Generation Z thing where he was obsessed with furry, gay, video games, and if you score certain points, then you get to look at pornography. And he said he wanted gay, hot sex or whatever. I don't know what his main deal was, but he was seriously unstable. Not that he didn't have pure knowledge of what he was doing, cognizance, he did. But there's a great article by my colleague Scott Atlas in this week's Real Clear Politics about Generation Z. And he goes through the whole thing about how they poll that they want people to be killed. He points out that Mr. Crooks, who's tried to kill Trump, was a Zer, so was Luigi Mangione, so was Tyler Robinson. And that this generation spends, he cites data, how many hours of the day they spend on video games or on their telephones. Are divorced from reality. They're angry because they can't buy a car or they can't buy a home. And he traces all of this dysfunctional generation and anger back to that disastrous 2020 to 22 lockdown, and that this generation was in primary school 5 years ago, or high school, and they were completely shut in their homes. They didn't interact with people, and they turned to electronic devices for a fantasy world. And then they had everything catered to them. Their food, everything was delivered. There was no effort to go out and get a job. You couldn't. It was lockdown. And he was trying to remind people, Scott was, how deleterious that was. Fauci. He paid a high price for telling us that at the time. And what he's trying to say now is it wasn't just the damage that people may have gotten from the vaccination or long COVID or anything. It was a whole generation was warped by the lockdown and the shut in.
And the anger didn't stay online. It spilled into the streets in the form of Antifa, black masks, organized attacks, all under the pretense of anti-fascism. But as Victor shows, these aren't just random outbursts. They're coordinated acts of intimidation, carried out by people who know exactly what they're doing.
Well, for the whole George Floyd period and the aftermath for 5 months, we saw every single night what I had called spaghetti-armed, not little, but adults dressed from head to toe in black, with a black mask, with little black backpacks with their little weaponry of stones or whatever. Some of them had masks. Some of them were outfitted de rigueur with, like special masks that somebody had given them. And then they would swarm on people. They would kick people. We had the internet had a mini industry of scenes where a carload of Antifa would pull into a neighborhood, but it was the wrong neighborhood, and there were somebody there that didn't like them, and then they chased them. And they weren't known to be very, heroic. They were always people who kicked people on the ground or piled on with BLM. What they're trying to, and then they said they're anti-fascist, Antifa. But Trump is not saying that somewhere in a little hideout is a guy named Grand Wizard of Antifa with a computer, and he sends out talking points. It's not like the DNC who sends out talking points and then everybody in the media nods and repeats them. He's just saying that people have adopted a similar practice, and there are local chapters that they use social to show up and commit violence.
While this violence played out in real time, the media chose a different role, covering it up. Instead of honesty, they doubled down on false stories. Jimmy Kimmel mocked, smeared, and lied to protect the narrative. But the truth has a way of cutting through. And in the end, even the market decided he was finished.
When Jimmy Kimmel lied about that, and when I think narrative number 2 or number 3 was either there was no motive or Trump did it or MAGA did it, there was the text messages between Robinson and his boy girlfriend, and they were very explicit about politics. There was his mother who was worried he went left. There was a dinner conversation where people in the family heard him. There's a chat. And then he had, not just take this on his, catch this on his, he had trans logos, he had Antifa symbols, he had anti-fascist. So what I'm getting at, it was not even ambiguous. So when Jimmy Kimmel went on there, he knew exactly that he was lying. And he was lying to the American people, and he knew it. And he was going to go back on there again when they asked him to give an apology, and he was going to lie, because he knows he's down to 800,000 or 900,000 hardcore leftists that are entertained. And Disney said, finally, I don't want to subsidize you anymore. There's not enough leftists that are going to buy our movies or go to a Disney park. You're just a loser. You're like Colbert. Everybody loves you, but you get this huge salary. And the thing to watch with all these people, it's something that I've always talked about in my business about speaking and writing. It's called market value. Capitalism does exist.
When the narratives collapse, when the lies are exposed, we're left with one simple reality. The system is broken, and the people know it. From failed lockdowns to violent mobs to media cover-ups, this isn't just a string of accidents. It's a pattern. And the more they deny it, the more obvious it becomes. The truth is catching up with them, and no amount of spin can hide it anymore. If you value honest analysis and real conversations, make sure to subscribe. Hit the like button and share your thoughts in the comments. What did we miss, and what should we tackle next? Your voice makes this community stronger. Let's keep pushing for the truth together.